On the 18th of August, 1997, Ashley Doolittle was born in the small but picturesque town of Loveland, Colorado. Her parents saw her as a person with a bright temperament, a sincere smile, and an indomitable will to achieve goals. Since childhood, she radiated warmth and a desire for self-realization, and this could not go unnoticed. From an early age, Ashley often visited the family ranch, where she saw horses for the first time. This event became a defining event in her life. Fascinated by their grace and strength, she watched these majestic animals with delight, and a little later, she took the first steps towards becoming a horsewoman. Her natural talent led to rapid progress. Already in her teens, Ashley participated in competitions and became the winner. Her family supported her in all her endeavors, hiring the best coaches and helping her realize her dreams. In 2016, her achievements were officially recognized. She received the title of Larimer County Rodeo Princess. It was not just a status, but an important stage that allowed her to represent her district, work with children, and participate in charitable initiatives. For Ashley, it was not only a reward for her hard work, but also an opportunity to inspire others to follow their dreams and work hard. In addition to sports, she was interested in studies, art, and theatrical productions. She actively participated in volunteer programs, trying to combine her studies, hobbies, and social activities. Her plans for the future were ambitious. Ashley dreamed of going to college, studying agriculture, and continuing to practice horse riding. She wanted to create a place where she could work with horses and help children by passing on her love for these animals. While in high school, Ashley met Tanner Flores, a guy who was a little older than her. He grew up in the same area and shared her love of rural life. Their acquaintance began with friendly communication, but soon developed into a romantic relationship. Initially, everything seemed perfect. They spent a lot of time together, traveled, and took pictures. Tanner seemed to share her dreams and support her aspirations. Many friends considered them a strong couple who really fit each other. However, over time it became noticeable that Tanner was showing excessive jealousy. He began to monitor Ashley, asking who she was spending time with, calling her several times a day, and waiting for a report on each step. At first, it was perceived as a concern, but gradually the situation became more and more tense. Ashley's friends noticed that she had changed, and that these relationships no longer brought her joy. As the months passed, Tanner's jealousy turned into a problem. Ashley, accustomed to freedom and independence, felt that she had fallen into a framework in which she was uncomfortable. She tried to explain to him that such behavior made her unhappy, but his outbursts of anger only intensified. Friends of the girl recalled that she had repeatedly talked about wanting to break off this relationship, but continued to hope that he would change. However, the situation has only worsened. By the end of 2015, Ashley realized that she could not continue this relationship. She gradually began to move away, focusing on her studies and sports. The breakup wasn't easy for her, but it was necessary to move on. However, Tanner didn't want to let her go. He kept calling, trying to meet up, even when she made it clear she wanted to move on. In early 2016, before graduation, Ashley made her final decision. She didn't want to be in this relationship anymore. Her friends supported her in this step, believing that it would only benefit her. She wanted to put everything in the past and focus on the future. It was a chance for her to start a new stage of her life, full of opportunities and hopes. But soon her dreams will collide with a cruel reality.
I talked to her that morning, and her last words were, "I love you." And I said, "I love you too."
On the 9th of June 2016, a hot summer day began at the Doolittle family home. Ashley went to the stable in the morning, where she took care of the horses. These moments were special for her. The warm sun rays, the calm breathing of animals, the familiar handwork. All this gave a sense of stability and comfort. In recent weeks, Ashley has been thinking a lot about her future plans. College, participation in local events, competitions. She was focused on her goals, discussed them with her parents, and built a clear route for her future path. After doing her morning chores, she quickly cleaned herself up and told her family that she was going away on business for a while. My parents didn't think much of it. Ashley was independent and responsible, and her trips around the city were commonplace. She got into the car, smiled goodbye, and drove off, promising to be back by evening. After a few hours, the sun began to set. Ashley hasn't shown up at home yet and hasn't warned anyone that she's staying late. At first, her parents tried to drive away bad thoughts, believing that she had stopped by a friend's house or was just getting carried away with business. However, calls to her phone went unanswered, and anxiety mounted. When Ashley's mother started calling her friends, she was even more alarmed by the answers. No one knew where she was, and only one friend remembered that Ashley was going to meet with Tanner Flores. This news alarmed the parents. They were sure that she had severed all ties with him. In recent months, she had avoided talking to Tanner, trying to move on without looking back at the past. But why did she suddenly decide to see him? The parents started to panic. They knew how painful the breakup of this relationship was. Tanner couldn't accept it. He continued to pursue Ashley, even though she repeatedly said that everything was over between them. She tried to be understanding, believing that he would eventually calm down. But his obsession only grew. Now that it became known that she had gone to him, the parents' fear reached its peak. They rushed to look for him. The first place they went to was the Long Hagler Reservoir. Ashley loved to spend time there and relax, but the sight made my heart clench with horror. Her car was parked in the parking lot, locked up. Ashley wasn't there. The parents were desperately trying to figure out what had happened. Why is her car here? But Ashley is nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, Ashley's friends were wondering why she had agreed to see him. Some suggested that he had found a way to convince her. Maybe he promised that this would be the last meeting. Perhaps Ashley wanted to finally explain to him that it was over and hoped that he would understand her. But no one could even imagine what this meeting would turn out to be for Ashley. As soon as the Larimer County Police received a report of Ashley Doolittle's disappearance, officers immediately arrived at the Long Hagler Reservoir. Her mother, who was in deep despair, met them on the spot. Through tears, she explained that her daughter had left in the afternoon, promising to return, but had not been in touch since. This morning, Ashley seemed cheerful and energetic, discussing plans for the coming weeks with her family, but now her phone was not responding. When the mother mentioned that Ashley was going to meet with her ex-boyfriend, Tanner Flores, it immediately attracted the attention of the officers. They understood that the recent breakup could have played a role in her disappearance. The police carefully examined Ashley's car, which was parked in the parking lot at the reservoir. The car was locked, and the interior looked like it had been left in a hurry, but with no signs of a struggle. However, the details that caught the officer's eye made them wary. Dust had settled on the wheels, and there were no signs of recent movement. This indicated that the car had been here for more than a few hours. The police went around the neighborhood, carefully examining every corner of the parking lot and the surrounding area. No traces were found, but the very fact of the young girl's disappearance already required urgent action. In conversation with the police, Ashley's mother did not hide her worries. She talked about her daughter's difficult relationship with Tanner, how he couldn't come to terms with the breakup and was constantly looking for ways to reconnect. He was obsessed with her life, showed jealousy, and repeatedly tried to convince Ashley to return to him. At that moment, the detectives already understood that a guy who could not accept a refusal could go to extreme measures. Officers began collecting information about his whereabouts on the day of Ashley's disappearance. At the same time, they interviewed visitors to the reservoir, hoping that someone might have noticed the girl or her ex-boyfriend. At first, the collected testimony was inconclusive. Many vacationers who were at the reservoir during the day did not see anything suspicious. However, one person reported that a car similar to Tanner's was parked near the parking lot around noon. Other visitors claimed that in the late afternoon they heard voices coming from the parking lot, but did not pay attention to it. This helped the police to recreate an approximate picture of events and understand that at the time of Ashley's disappearance, her ex-boyfriend could really be nearby. Realizing that the reservoir may have been just a starting point, the police decided to expand the search operation. Officers brought in service dogs to determine a possible route for Ashley. They carefully combed the trails, forest belts, and coastline adjacent to the reservoir. However, these searches did not bring results. No signs of a struggle or the girl's personal belongings were found. This increased the investigators' concerns most likely. Ashley did not leave the reservoir territory of her own free will. At this time, the Doolittle family home became the headquarters for the search for his daughter. My parents couldn't find a place for themselves. Each new call could bring news, good or bad. Ashley's father, who usually remained calm, now looked depressed. Her mother couldn't eat or sleep, replaying endless questions in her head. Why had Ashley agreed to meet with Tanner? What did he say to her? Why is her car parked by the reservoir, but she's not there? Relatives and friends gathered in the house, trying to support the family and offer help. Someone was calling friends, someone was monitoring social media, hoping that Ashley had left some kind of trace. But as the hours passed, there was no clarity. The investigators continued to collect evidence, realizing that time was playing against them. They analyzed surveillance cameras, checked phone calls, and searched for any possible clue that might indicate where Tanner went after meeting with Ashley. By the morning of the 10th of June, police found out that Tanner had filled up his pickup truck and withdrawn cash shortly before the girl disappeared, indicating preparations for the trip. With every passing hour, the hope of finding Ashley alive was fading. The investigators knew that if they didn't get on Flores's trail as soon as possible, this story could end tragically. After it became clear that Tanner Flores might be involved in the disappearance of Ashley Doolittle, Larimer County Police began an active search. The first place the officers went to was his parents' house. It was logical he had been living there lately, and perhaps his family knew where he could be. The police arrived on the morning of the 10th of June, hoping either to find Tanner at home or to get information that would help in the investigation. The door was opened by the guy's parents, clearly surprised by the unexpected visit. When the officers asked where their son was, they replied that he had left home the night before and had not returned. According to them, he said he was going to spend the night with a friend but did not specify who exactly. The time of his departure coincided with the moment of Ashley's disappearance, and the officers no longer doubted Tanner's involvement in the case. The officers asked for permission to inspect the house to make sure Tanner wasn't there. The parents, realizing the seriousness of the situation, agreed. Tanner really wasn't in the house. However, during a conversation with Tanner's parents, the police learned about the lack of a change of clothes. This indicated that Tanner had most likely left not for one night but was planning a longer absence. Tanner's father also recalled that around the same time his son left the house, his revolver disappeared. The man did not attach any importance to this, and at first did not connect these events, suggesting that Tanner could have taken a weapon for self-defense. However, after Ashley's disappearance, these details took on a completely different hue. Thus, the detectives formed a version that the young man could have planned his escape in advance after the crime. Investigators began analyzing possible places where Tanner could hide, based on information received from his family. During the conversation, the parents remembered that they have a plot in Colebran, a small and remote town in western Colorado. This house once belonged to Tanner's grandfather, and the young man himself had been there many times. This detail turned out to be important for the investigation. If Tanner was really hiding, then such a secluded place could be an ideal hiding place for him. The police have added this area to the list of priority locations for inspection. However, there was uncertainty. The parents could not say for sure whether their son really went there or chose a different route. This meant that the investigators had to find out as soon as possible whether he was in Colebran or look for other possible hiding places. The officers immediately contacted colleagues from other counties, distributed orientation points to Tanner and his car. Patrolmen throughout the region were given a description of the car, its make and license plate. Now the search has moved beyond Larimer County. The police began to act quickly, realizing that every minute could be crucial. Tanner's parents were shocked by what was happening. They couldn't believe that their son could be involved in the girl's disappearance. His father insisted that Tanner was upset after the breakup, but he never showed aggression. His mother cried, remembering how kind and caring he was as a child. However, these words could not dispel the doubts of the police. All the evidence pointed to Tanner being the prime suspect. On the 10th of June 2016, Larimer County Police received important information. Tanner Flores, the main suspect in the disappearance of Ashley Doolittle, could be hiding at a police station in Colebran. Without wasting any time, the officers set off, knowing that the suspect was armed and could resist. When the police arrived at the station, they were immediately alerted by the oppressive silence. The house looked abandoned. There was no sign of activity around, but Tanner's silver pickup truck was parked in the parking lot. The car was covered in dust, but there were bloodstains on the body. The officers knew that they had to act carefully. Tanner could be inside, and the revolver that had gone missing from his parents' house was still in his possession. After knocking on the door and hearing no answer, they decided to enter. Upon entering, the police immediately noticed a pungent smell. They began to explore the rooms and soon came across a terrible picture in the bedroom. A body wrapped in a blanket lay on a neatly made bed. It belonged to Ashley Doolittle. Forensic experts later determined that she had been shot in the head. This discovery confirmed the investigators' fears and explained why Tanner took the revolver from his parents' house. Tanner Flores was in the other room, sitting on the couch. He didn't try to escape, he didn't try to hide, he just waited in silence. When the police entered, he did not even look up at them. His arrest was carried out without resistance. The officers handcuffed him and checked his license, but Tanner remained impassive. He answered all the questions in silence. The police began to thoroughly inspect the house and the territory. Traces of blood were found in Tanner's car, and the revolver used to commit the murder was on the living room table. He didn't try to hide the weapon, it was in plain sight, as if he already knew it would be found. Each discovery added a new detail to the overall picture of the crime, making the case more and more obvious. When the police took Tanner to the station, Ashley's parents found out about the terrible discovery. Their worst fears were confirmed. The girl who had recently made plans for the future was no longer there. Tanner's parents were horrified. They couldn't believe that their son was capable of murder. His mother was sobbing, and his father stood in a daze, unable to utter a word. At the police station, Tanner Flores sat at the table in the interrogation room, motionless like a cornered animal. The investigators started with the formalities. They fixed his location, clarified the details of his detention. But most importantly, they were trying to figure out why he did it. At first, Tanner was silent. He stared at one point, avoiding the eyes of the officers, but they were in no hurry. The investigators knew that the longer he sat in silence, the more likely he was to speak. They laid out the evidence in front of him: photos of Ashley's body, weapons, traces of blood in his car. All this proved his involvement. Tanner sighed. He realized that it was pointless to deny the obvious. His voice was low and shaky. He began to talk. On the afternoon of the 9th of June, he met with Ashley at the Long Hagler Reservoir. He wanted to talk, to convince her to try again, to give them another chance. But the conversation quickly turned into an argument. Ashley said it was over between them. Those words broke Tanner. He couldn't accept them. In a fit of rage, he pulled out a revolver and fired twice. After the murder, Tanner was in shock. He didn't know what to do. He loaded Ashley's body into the car and drove to Colbrand, the only place where he could hide. He spent the night there, unable to comprehend what had happened. He just left the body on the bed, wrapped it in a blanket, but did not figure out what to do next. During the interrogation, Tanner was restrained. He said he hadn't planned this, that he didn't want to hurt Ashley. He said, "I just wanted her to hear me." But the detectives understood that this was not an excuse, and he had a long trial ahead of him.
She was kidnapped and killed by her ex-boyfriend.
After Tanner's confession, he was charged with kidnapping and first-degree murder. The case went to court. In the fall of 2017, the trial of Tanner Flores, accused of the brutal murder of 18-year-old Ashley Doolittle, began. This trial caused a wide public outcry. Residents of Colorado followed the progress of the case, and Ashley's family and friends hoped that justice would prevail. The court hearings were held in a tense atmosphere. The tragic death of the girl shocked the community, and many came to the courtroom to see with their own eyes the man who was accused of this crime. From the very beginning of the trial, the prosecutor's office presented a clear version of events. Tanner Flores did not just succumb to a sudden impulse, but planned the outcome of the meeting with Ashley Doolittle in advance. During the first hearing, the prosecution presented in detail the key facts indicating the intentional nature of the crime. The prosecution also noted that Tanner made no attempt to call for help or conceal his crime at the time of the murder, but instead coolly took Ashley's body to the family plot in Colbrand. All this, according to the prosecutors, proved that his actions were not accidental or caused by a surge of emotions, but represented a carefully thought-out and deliberate act of violence. The prosecution presented strong evidence supporting the guilt of Tanner Flores. The murder weapon is a caliber revolver, .22. It was found in his grandfather's house, and a ballistic examination confirmed that it was from him that the fatal shots were fired. Traces of Ashley's blood were found in the back of the pickup truck in which Tanner transported the body, which was another indisputable proof. But the most important moment was his own confession. During the interrogation, Tanner stated that he could not cope with his emotions, thereby confirming that the murder was not an accident. The witnesses also said that Ashley had no intention of resuming relations with Tanner and was already moving on, which completely refuted the defense's version of a sudden conflict. The prosecutors emphasized his composure. After the murder, he did not try to escape, but transported the girl's body to her grandfather's house, wrapped it in a blanket, and made no attempt to cover his tracks. All this pointed to the awareness of his actions and the lack of remorse. Tanner's lawyers tried to convince the court that their client had not planned the murder in advance. They claimed that he was emotionally depressed after breaking up with Ashley and was acting out of passion. They described Tanner as a young man with no criminal record who made a fatal mistake in a moment of mental turmoil. The defense insisted that it was a tragic outburst of anger, not a premeditated crime. However, these arguments did not convince the prosecutors, who insisted that the fact that Tanner had taken a gun in advance and lured Ashley to a meeting proved his deliberate actions. At the trial, the testimony of many witnesses was heard: friends, relatives, and acquaintances of Ashley. They shared their memories of her kind and bright character, her love of horseback riding, and dreams that never came true. These words painted the image of a girl who aspired to a new life, but whose fate was tragically cut short. The performance of Ashley's mother was especially emotional. With tears in her eyes, she told about her daughter's fears, how Tanner haunted her, how she tried to leave him, but he continued to haunt her. Her words began to confirm that the threat from Tanner existed long before the fateful day. This became one of the most important moments of the trial, proving that the murder was not an accident, but the result of a long-term persecution. At the final court hearing in October 2017, when the verdict was announced, there was intense silence in the courtroom. Tanner Flores was found guilty of 2 charges: first-degree murder and second-degree kidnapping. He was given a life sentence without the right to parole. The judge, addressing Tanner Flores, emphasized the cruelty and premeditation of his actions. "You took a young girl's life because of your own selfishness. Ashley Doolittle had the right to freedom, to a future, to happiness, but you decided that her fate should depend on you. This court cannot return her daughter to her family, but it can make sure that you can never harm anyone else again." Reaction to the verdict. Ashley's family and friends, who were present in the audience, could not hold back their tears. Although justice had been done, none of them believed that it would bring relief, because nothing could bring their beloved Ashley back. This process left a deep mark in the hearts of all who followed it. For some, it was a triumph of justice. For others, it was a tragedy that could not be fully comprehended. Ashley's family, despite the verdict, knew that no punishment could fill the void left by her loss. They hoped that this story would be a warning to other young people that control and obsession have nothing to do with love. Tanner's parents, hunched over on the bench, hoped to the last to hear words that could justify their son, but they did not come out. They lost him the moment he pulled the trigger. This process was the final point in a tragic story that shook Colorado, but the pain it left will not go away. It became a reminder of the importance of respect, freedom of choice, and the ability to accept that not everything in life can be controlled.